Kitty cat's tired, so I apologize in advance. There's gonna be minimal kitty cat in this video. I mean, other than her sitting as kitty bread. Exactly. Oh, you're coming to see me! Madam. Madam Kitty Cat. Madam Kitty Cat. Oh my gosh, your breath is so stinky. Why does it smell like that? It smells like fish. I've been giving you fish. What did you eat? Hey, it's Drea and ShabTabs. Thanks for joining me today for another video. Before I get started, throw me some thumbs, subs, and comments down below. As y'all know, I don't get paid for this. It's just a fun hobby. So your feedback is what makes it all worth it for me. In case you're new here and my data on YouTube tells me that a lot of you are, my name is Drea and I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I currently work full-time and I go to Georgetown Law as a part-time/evening law student. Today, I'm here to talk about something that I get a lot of questions about, and that is the prospects of going to big law as a part-time/evening law student. Since this is such a big topic, I'm gonna upload multiple videos. This is the first, where I'll talk about some of the resources that were helpful to me as I was figuring out which law firms I wanted to apply to and where they were. I'll upload a second video talking about general on-campus interviews, and a third video providing OCI tips and tricks that may be more relevant to part-time evening students. So let's get started with the first part, which is resources. Long story short, if you have prospects of working in big law, there are a ton of resources out there that can help you begin the process. The first one that I'm going to talk about is something called Vault Rankings, or I think the new name of the company might be First Hand, but I could be getting that wrong. Honestly, I don't know a ton about this company, but to my limited knowledge, they rank the top 100 law firms, largely arbitrarily based on the reputation amongst lawyers that work within the field. They also rank law firms by practice area and by geographic area. If I'm not mistaken, their methodology is based on a survey that they send out to lawyers where they collect data about reputations for law firms. The reason why this is so arbitrary is because it's kind of similar to the peer review or peer reputation portion of what used to be the recently blown up US News and World Report rankings. Similar to how law schools were ranked based on peer review, Vault ranks law firms based on basically what other lawyers think of them. I'm not sure how helpful that information is at the end of the day, but nonetheless, if you're planning to go to big law, it is likely a list that you will inevitably run into. I've included a link down to Vault in the description box, but I will say, one, typically looking at this information is not free. If you have access to it through your law school, that can be a helpful method. And my second point about Vault or first-hand rankings is that no company is going to be able to list and rank law firms in a way that is particularly valuable to you as an applicant. These lists, like many things that you will encounter and probably have encountered in law school, should be taken with a grain of salt. The second resource that I'm going to talk about is called NALP, which stands for the National Association for Law Placement. NALP compiles basic information about law firms. This includes things like demographics, compensation and benefits, practice areas and hourly requirements, and so on. If you're familiar with law school consumer information, NALP forms are the equivalent of an American Bar Association 509 report, just in this case, they're about law firms rather than law schools. The reason why this information is particularly helpful during the application process is because it provides quantitative or numeric data on each law firm in a way that makes it easier to compare one law firm to another. NALP also has numbers that are specific to a geographic location of a given law firm. So for example, there may be a law firm that has multiple offices, one in Chicago, one in LA, one in New York. NALP will list demographics and numeric data for that particular office. For example, the specific office in Washington, D.C., or the specific office in Chicago. While NALP forms can be extremely helpful, I do want to advise anyone looking at them to also look at them with a little bit of caution. Sometimes the information on them I found to be out of date. For example, for the law firm that I ultimately chose to go to, the NALP form had an outdated pay rate. I noticed that to be the case with a couple of other firms where I received offers. I've also included a link in the description description box for NALP down below. The third resource that I have to mention today is a website called Chambers Associate. Somewhat loosely similar to what Vault does. Chambers Associate ranks law firms. It ranks them into something called bands, I believe 1 through 5. My understanding is that they also compile these bands based on associate or law associate feedback. What makes Chambers Associate particularly helpful is that they rank practice areas based on a geographic location. So for example, if you're interested in something like intellectual property, Chambers Associate can give you a list of the most competitive firms in that practice area, in that geographic area. This said, a slight limitation of Chambers Associate is that they also sometimes have outdated information. So proceed with caution, like all of the other things that I've mentioned today. The final and last resource that I'll mention today is a website called Above the Law. While I'm not super familiar with them in my limited exposure, and I don't mean any shade by saying this, but I would compare them to something loosely similar to the TMZ of law firms and law practice. They often report on things like a law firm's pay scales, bonuses, clients, and other general information that may be helpful to know if you're interested in a particular law firm and a particular geographic location. While me comparing them to TMZ might seem a little harsh, I think what reminds me of TMZ when I look at their website is the fact that they accept tips from people that work at law firms so that they can keep certain information like pay scales or bonus scales up to date. Before I head out, I'll mention one last thing that was a helpful resource, and this is maybe something that I should have mentioned first. That's law firm websites. I use law firm websites to look at things like who the hiring partner is, or what the typical trajectory was of an associate or of a partner. These are also helpful because you can look at things like the typical cases that associates work on or the typical cases that partners work on. And while some of these cases may reference work that they've done at a different law firm or in their previous roles, you can typically use it to gauge out what kind of work people at the law firm are generally interested in taking on. You can also look at law firm press releases to see which types of stories, narratives, clients are floating to the top. All right, so there we have it. Resources that I looked at while I was applying to law firms during OCI this past summer. If you've gone through the law school or law firm OCI application process, feel free to drop comments down below detailing what resources you found helpful or not helpful. Also, feel free to talk about some of the resources that I've mentioned, whether you've looked at them. I do think it's helpful to at least click on those websites, familiarize yourself with them at least maybe a week or so before OCI actually begins. I've left links to everything down in the description box below. That's all I've got today, and I'll see y'all in a couple of weeks.